Hi, everybody. Wade and Thomas here with another episode of the Setter Tales podcast, and
23.
number 23. And we've been kind of been off for a couple weeks. We've had some things going on, and so we're back tonight. And anyone that's out there watching live, feel free to ask us some questions. We're not going to have a guest tonight, but we're just going to go over some things that we've been doing. And as you can see, it's getting cold out there.
Yeah. Weather's changing and I'm ready. I'm ready to roll.
Yeah, it's starting to get cool. It's feeling more like bird hunting weather, and I think the dogs are sensing it as well. And we were pretty busy this last weekend. We want to talk a little bit about an event that Thomas and I both were involved in. For the last 8 years, the Lynn County Pheasants Forever chapter in Cedar Rapids has put on a heroes hunt. And some years it's veterans, and other years it's law enforcement. And this last Sunday, we had 28 law enforcement officers representing four different states that came down and hunted pheasants. And Thomas was guiding with his dogs with one of the groups, and I was kind of master of ceremony, so to speak. And I wasn't in the field, but was trying to make sure everything ran smoothly, which it did. It was a great event. The weather was beautiful, and I think for the most part, everybody got birds.
Yeah, my whole group, I think we shot probably 16, I think, on the final tally, even though we lost a couple. The
Yeah.
other guy dropped a couple in the field, but we missed a lot too. So that's all right, but we
Well,
had a great time.
it's been so dry, and down there it's drier than a bone, and so when those crippled birds would hit the ground and run, boy, the dogs were just having a tough time with it. And so it was, I think a lot of the groups had that same problem. And we didn't lose that many, but there was a few that were in the cover. The cover is gnarly, as you know.
Oh,
And this time of year, boy, it's brutal. And but the dogs did great work. The temperature stayed fairly cool up until 10:30 or so. It started
yeah,
getting a little bit warm,
about the
and
last 45 minutes, the temperature really got up, and you could just tell that the hunters were getting wore out, and no matter how much water the dogs actually they got tired of drinking water. They were just like, "Hey guys, we're in running shape, but this whole hunting shape difference, we're feeling it." So
yeah, and one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit tonight is having your dog, ready to go, and even though you think your dog's in good condition, and maybe you're in good condition, a day like Sunday morning, kind of makes you kind of it's a good way to look at it and see where you're at,
yeah,
and I think probably a lot of the dogs struggled a little bit. I know that I think by time I'm glad we didn't have an afternoon session like we have in past years, because I think that would have been a little much. But it was good to getting out there, getting the dogs in some action. First part of the year, I think it's going to be a tremendous year. Bird numbers are up, wild bird numbers, and so we're really looking forward to a great season that we can continue to talk to all of you about. Yeah, the hunt, the heroes hunt. If you want to find more information about it, you can find some photos and some other information at the Lynn County Pheasants Forever website. And yeah, it's just a great event. We love being involved in it, and obviously having Thomas down there is kind of one of the things we both like to do. We like to use our dogs to support these types of organizations, and it was nice having you down there, buddy, to help out. I was a little short on guides this year, so I needed it was quite a commitment for Thomas because he comes 2 hours. I mean, he has to drive 2 hours to get there. So, that's the kind of commitment that he's willing to make. And all of our guides volunteer their time. And so they're down there with their dogs volunteering their time. So it's a great event. We're going to do it again next year, maybe make it a little bigger next year, and hopefully allow more people to participate. I will say that I pulled in, I was making some rounds of all the fields at different times, collecting birds that had been harvested, and so our bird cleaners were able to kind of keep pace during the morning. And I do remember when I pulled into Thomas's field, he had a young man, a young officer there from Indiana, I
mm-hmm.
believe, and he was holding this bird, actually cradling the bird, and it had a very nice tail on it. And as I collected up the birds to take back to be cleaned, he took that bird and carefully placed it in the van that they were
Mm-hmm.
driving in, and said, "This bird is coming back to Indiana with me." So he was going to take that bird back and hopefully have it displayed somewhere on his in his man cave, hopefully. And
Yeah.
he said he'd send us a picture. I hope he does. But
Yeah.
so if you're out there and you're listening, we're waiting to see that picture. In fact, if you send it to us, we'll probably
We'll put it right up
display
here.
that on one of our podcast episodes coming up here. But a great event, lots of fun, and hopefully we'll get to repeat that again next year. Uh, as the weather is changing, and it obviously is 2 weeks till opener. Um, you need to make that assessment of your dogs now. And we went through a little first aid class down at the preserve where we both guide, and we're going to talk about a little bit of that tonight. Just some things that you all need to think about, and maybe you need to carry with you for some first aid things. And we'll talk about some personal experiences that we've had. Hopefully, all of you, have a safe season, and your dog doesn't get any major injuries. But typically, along the way, you're going to get a ding here and there, and a fence or whatever. That's fairly common. Get a bad pad or whatever. But hopefully, you can stay away from the very, very serious things that uh, uh, challenge and cause a threat to the dog's life that you would have to get immediately to a vet. But that can happen, and has happened in the past. So we'll talk about some of those things. As far as conditioning goes, it's interesting because you know you don't know until you get out there, kind of to be able to gauge sometimes whether your dogs are game ready, which is what we call
Yep.
it. There's a big difference from running a dog, exercising a dog in the backyard, or taking them on runs, or roading them or whatever, and then but actually when they're in there working that heavy cover, and they're down in those those kind of conditions are hard to duplicate when you're just simply training. And so anyway, hopefully everybody you can build on that and has their dog ready to go. I was at the vet today, as a matter of fact, and I had my oldest setter Adeline in. And I noticed the other day, this is the kind of thing that you really need to pay attention to. You know your dogs, especially dogs like her that I've had for multiple years. But I noticed that she didn't seem like she was, like her hearing was off. She
Mm-hmm.
didn't seem like she was. I came by the truck and she didn't even like look up like she, would. Typically she's, raring to go. She wants out of the box. She wants her turn, and she wasn't doing that. And I thought that's really odd. And so anyway, but she was due to go in for a checkup anyway. We had her in there, and I mentioned that, and our vet took a look in her ears, and very deep in one of her ears, she ended up having a fairly severe infection that we didn't know about, and so we're getting that treated now. But those are the kind of things that preseason, if you can get your dog checked out, make sure they're healthy and they're ready to go, and they don't have something like that you need to take care of. It really helps.
And that's a big thing I do. And every year we do our shots and we get our rabies, we get our wormings, and I always make sure I do that right before hunting season. That way I know everybody's in shape. Everybody's in good shape. They're, you got all the things they need. I treat them with flea and tick all summer and heartworm, so I know that should be clear. But rabies, and you don't hear about rabies, but then you do hear about it. And when you do hear about it, it's not a good deal. So, and the distemper, and one big thing with distemper now is the trapping's way down. Nobody's trapping, and raccoons and skunks and possums that usually are getting in those traps are just multiplying. Nobody's going after them, so they carry distemper. So these dogs are drinking out of stagnant water ponds and creeks and low spots like that. So it's just something you want them treated for. And you hit the nail right in the head. You can go run your dog in the lawn and watch them run around in the mowed grass, and that's one thing I focus on. You know, 3-4 weeks before season, they're always running around, keep them in shape. I don't let them get fat in the summer, but let's get in the grass, let's get these dogs in shape. And the big thing that you have to learn is what that dog's limits are. So the first couple times you're out in the grass, it may only be a half hour, but you're getting those muscles conditioned. And if you do push it too hard, you're going to know. Especially the next day. If they're all hunched up and you can say, okay, I run them too hard, their muscles are hurting. Let's tonight just take it easy. Next night, let's push them hard. And, the first couple nights it was warm, but we started really hitting it hard in that green grass and it's poles on them. And I could just tell, okay, they got a mile here. You watch my Garmin. Oh, we got 2 miles and let's quit, and Sunday they're in fairly good shape. They're still that, I think by the time I left Highland, it was 75 degrees. So probably 65 when we quit hunting, and they were done with water and they're just had enough. So it's like, okay, let's angle back towards the truck and be done for the day. We've got plenty of birds. Everybody's gotten shots. And just when you can see that happening, a lot of dogs don't give up. And of course, CJ doesn't have that give up. So I got to bring her and say, okay, it's time to quit.
Yeah.
She come in, laid by the water dish for 2 seconds, took a drink. And then I looked at the Garmin while we were shooting the bull, and she's out there hunting again. It's like, all right, we're quitting getting the dog box.
Yeah,
So
I got one of those too, and he was like, like he said, you gotta be the the person that calls the shots when it comes to switching out dogs and knowing when they have enough, and especially early in the year, you know, you know, less is better, and early in the year, you know, if you're gonna do that, then put them up. But
and if they're in the house, a lot of people keep their dogs in the house. I, from time to time, do, but their feet, it's a big deal because they're in the house, they're on carpet, they're on smooth, they're out in the nice plush grass and the lawn, and their feet got to get that toughness built up. And mine are on cement during the day, and I really think that helps their pads. But you get a dog out there that's got real soft feet, and you get them out there in that, especially that rough stuff. You have to. These dogs have to be conditioned. And
just things to keep in mind. You talked about raccoons, and we'll talk about some of that, but my worst experience was encountering a raccoon in the middle of the afternoon in a CRP field, which, I didn't expect. Hunting a creek edge or something like that, you kind of expect it, but and this guy, when we broke him out of his nap, he was pissed off. And so, but he did cause some damage to one of my dogs, and we'll talk about some bleeding issues and the things and what to do. But the guys, and I don't know if you heard this, but one of the guys Sunday actually encountered a skunk in the field. And luckily, he saw what was about to develop, and he was able to get his dogs away from the area without getting sprayed, and his hunters away from the area without getting sprayed. But those are just some of those are the pitfalls of hunting upland dogs sometimes. And, you have to be kind of prepared for that. But we're going to talk about a few things, and, we've gone over some first aid issues, and, you can, there's lots of commercial medical kits and things you can buy, but there's probably and all that's great. So it's better to have more than you need than not to have it when to be short something when you really need it. But we'll just talk about a few items, and I know you've got a fairly extensive kit that you carry when you go, especially when you go on cross country kind of hunts where you're away from home and that kind of thing. So let's just kind of talk about a few of the things. I know one of my biggest concerns, I think, because I've had some problems in the past with it, are really eyes, and I saw that Monday after the Heroes hunt, I actually guided a group, and I had my dogs out in that same cover, and the conditions were pretty much the same. And right now, there's just seeds on everything. I mean, everything has got seeds, and and so those dogs are just pounding through this debris that's all over their coat and in their face and in their eyes. And so it's really very important that when you get done with that dog on the tailgate, that you really do something about those eyes, check them, clear them, and flush them if you've got some saline with you, which is something that everybody ought to carry. And what's some other things that you've got in your kit?
And you don't have to go to the vet for most of this stuff. You can go right to the dollar store or any medical store like a Walgreens or Dollar General or anything. So, the big one that I did always carry, I was a contact wearer, so I always had contact solution. Well, I've now switched it to an actual eye flush. It comes with a little cup. They hate it. They absolutely hate it, but I think they understand. You just give it a couple squirts, and then you kind of just let them work it out by blinking, and sometimes they'll rub their eyes with their feet. You know, the old school way, I just always have a sharp knife in my pocket, which I always have a pocket knife in case they get caught up in something or you got to really do something. Scissors, and you know, we used to have duct tape, and if you had to use your sleeve or whatever back in the day, and that's it. But you
There's
know,
nothing wrong with duct tape.
no,
Duct tape is
and
always
it
nice
makes
to
a
have.
quick fix, and the vets don't like it that much if you come in with a dog all wrapped up in duct tape. But you know, gauze. You have
Yeah.
some stuff. A big thing I love to use, I call it horse tape. Something I have all the
Yes.
time.
It's really
I got
what it
5
is.
packets of this
I think
in
I
my
stole
truck.
this from my wife who has horses, but yeah, this vet wrap is what they call it. But you can get a pretty good sized roll of this, I think, for $3.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty cheap.
It's
But
fairly
what's
cheap.
really cool about this is it's kind of it adheres to itself, and so you could wrap that around a dog's leg or whatever, and it sticks really well. And then what we've used it before is if you wrap a wound or something with this product and then maybe go over it with a duct tape.
Yep.
What happens is the duct tape, you can cut that off and it won't stick to the hair of the dog. This product here will just peel right off. And so you probably one of my setters, he I don't know, he seemed like he pounded the cover so hard that a lot of times he would cause abrasions to the front of his legs from going through these, especially this time of year. And once you get an abrasion and a wound like that on the front of a dog's leg, about the time it heals up, they break it open again. And so I started wrapping his front legs with this product, and that really, really helped a lot. And by the time the hunt was over, the duct tape would just be shredded. I mean,
Yeah.
you're thinking that's the kind of punishment that this dog's legs are taking. But great product, cheap, you know.
Yeah.
And this is something lightweight that you can carry in your vest or in your rig that you're actually in the field with. And we'll talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, and I
'cause-
actually carry 2 of these in the box. I got one in my first aid kit, and then I actually have one of these in my pouch. And really, I've used
Yeah.
it on myself before. I cut myself one time on some
Yep.
thorn brush,
Yeah.
and it got me good. So I just wrapped it up, and
Which is kind of cool about the products is a lot of it you not only can use on dogs, but you can use it on people too if you need to in the field, either yourself or somebody that's a companion that's hunting with you if they get some kind of cut or whatever. So those are things that you want to think about, and you know you don't have to carry like an EMT bag on the back of your rig, but if you take the basic stuff that you think you may need, stop bleeding, tape like this. A lot of the stuff you can do back at the truck, but if you're out in the field, away from the truck, think about what you might need in order to do some triage on that dog.
Yeah.
And really the main thing is stopping bleeding. If you got a situation like that where the dog is cut on a fence and has some arterial bleeding and that kind of thing, then you got to get that blood stopped. And so you should carry something that some bandages of some sort, some sterile pads, something that you can get that bleeding stopped. And so so all of us carry on the back of our rigs just kind of a mini kit, I would call it,
yeah.
kind of that emergency thing that I might need out here and get me to and until I can get to the truck to get the more extensive equipment.
Yeah, and you know, we kind of had a guy that tell us, all the stuff he carries, and he was an EMT for a lot of years, so I mimicked my pack. I just had your regular first aid, and I thought, that's not really that good. If something gets hurt and I'm out in the field, got somebody with me, especially if I'm guiding, just say, hey, there's this big bag right here, bring it, and fresh towels, rubber gloves, everything you can think of, just throw it in there. You don't have to carry it with you. I got alcohol, I got peroxide, and I got them both in spray bottles, so you just don't dump it all out. You get precision spraying and makes it easier, and they're not spilling all over. Iodine's not a bad one. You can get staple guns at most vets. There's some magazines you can buy them off. I don't recommend everybody giving their dog staples if they have a cut, but if it's a dire need, at least maybe if you have the vet show you how to use it, I wouldn't be the guinea pig.
I mean,
but,
if that's the only thing you can close a wound up with,
yeah, I mean,
then do it.
I've
use
seen a lot of people just carry staples around and like, man, your dog's got staples. what's that for? Well, he cut himself the other night. Oh, how'd you do it? Well, I just held him down and did it. Another big thing that I saw actually on one of the English Setter Facebook pages, this beautiful white dog, and he was just blood from his tip of his nose all the way down his back, and he'd cut his ear. And this guy took him to the vet, and they knocked the dog out. They did surgery on it, clipped the ear, burned it, and stitched it all together. It split, and that's a lot of work to do because those ears just bleed. And an old school guy showed me a little flour maybe, or get the bleeding stop, and then pull a tube sock over their head, cut the end off so their head comes out, and then maybe some vet wrap and some duct tape. And you usually can get the ear to stop bleeding, but the minute it does, the dog's going to shake their ear and open that cut back up. So that is another tool that I actually have a pair of tube socks in the truck for that reason. And, that's just, everybody's going to have a different opinion on what they take. And that's just something that I carry around and hopefully never use it.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. Hopefully you don't use it, but if you do, I was involved in a situation where a gentleman was actually shot by another gentleman, and that was one of those deals where you don't ever expect that, but when it happens, we needed to do what we had some bandages and other things, which we really were carrying for dog care, but it turned out to be helpful in that particular incident. So yeah, it's a necessary thing, and we kind of sometimes don't think about it as much as we could. But this is a good time to be thinking about getting your dog checked up, make sure they're healthy when we start the season, and keep them that way till the end. So
yeah, and that's as long as them being in shape. I live along a big area of public hunting, and the last 2 weeks I've just been seeing people in and out of the grass. Like, oh, we got a week left, we better get them ready, and I applaud those people, but it's not just run them one day, a couple days a week, and then take them out, and then those dogs get a huge, when my dogs see a gun, they have a whole different attitude. They get a charge, and then they don't want to give up because that's what they're there to do. So just keep an eye on them. Keep your dogs trimmed. If they got long hair, we fight that regularly.
yeah, boy.
And
yeah, Addie looks a little different today than she did Monday.
yeah, I just got another kit to do a little better trimming myself,
Yeah.
and get them brushed out. Even if they're a short-haired dog, those seeds, especially foxtail and stuff, you want to comb them out because they will get into their skin, and they migrate into their insides. They screw up their lungs. They can screw up their liver. They get abscesses because eventually that seed's going to migrate through, and then it's going to want to come out. And
Be some nasty stuff.
it's just like a sliver. Eventually it's going to push its way out, but it goes in first. So that's another thing. Just kind of feel your dogs around, pet them. I start at their ears and I pet them all the way down, rub their legs, rub their muscles, see if there's any sore spots. And if there are, you either, rest them, make sure they get plenty of water. A trick I did learn the other night is the guy's like, use your own water. If they don't want to drink, get them to drink. And he actually puts a little dog food, shakes it up, gets that smell and that flavor in there. And then, he's not putting a whole cup. He's putting 5 or 6 kernels in there, and they're drinking it.
And that's an important thing that a lot of people don't think about is if you're going on a hunt, even when we go out of state, we do our best to carry enough water from home because just the change in that water from one place to another could cause some intestinal situations with your dog, and then they're under stress anyway because you're traveling, and you don't think much about that. But the water, just the change of the water, could be a big deal. So try to keep that in mind as well. We had a question. A listener wanted to know about the eye check and specifically what we do with that. And a lot of times you probably hear people talk about tailgate checks, and that's basically what that means is we got a dog box in the back of our trucks, and we're coming in. We've been hunting for a period of time, and we're either done and we're putting the dogs away, or we're changing dogs. And during that period of time, there's usually a break in the action, so to speak. But that's a great time you got the dog up on the tailgate. It's the dog is at a height where you can easily monitor what's going on, control the dog, but at the same time do a real good examination. And as Thomas mentioned with the eyes, basically what I'll do is just use my hands to roll the eyes back, and I'll just kind of look all around. Sometimes you see something very obvious. You'll see a seed or something laying on the bottom inside the eyelid, and those are pretty easy to clear. But at the same time, when you're done with that, it's always nice to do the saline rinse to get some of that smaller pollen and other things that you can't see rinsed out of there. And it doesn't take that long. And the benefits can be, as Thomas mentioned, if left alone, those seeds can migrate into the back of the eye and can go into other places and really cause a lot of infection and problems.
Yeah, and I've heard of dogs getting poked in the eye by sticks, and you wouldn't know it, and the next day you wake up and their eyes are all crusted up, and especially Sunday, it was so dry down there. When the birds got up, they had a trail of dust behind them, and the dogs come in, their eyes are all red. They're flying. I mean, you didn't need a GPS or a beeper or nothing on them. You could just hear it crunching, and you could see the dust, and they're sniffing all that stuff, and it's in their eyes. Their eyes are wide open, and my dog's eyes were red and bloodshot, and they were scratching. So
that's kind of how we do the eye thing. The first is that physical examination to see what we can see, if there's anything obvious, and then if you have saline, which I would recommend that everybody carry, just do a rinse of the dog's eyes. Some people like to wait till the end. They've changed out dogs, and that dog's sitting in its crate for a period of time while the rest of the hunt is going on. I'd say when that dog gets on top of that tailgate from that hunt, check him over or her over and make sure that you can address some of those issues. We also take a look at the ears, of course, as Thomas mentioned, and then I'll usually roll the gums back and look for seed debris or anything that gets in underneath and gets hung up against the teeth up into far parts of that gum. And those are other things. If you get the wrong kind of debris, grass seeds in there, they can also migrate up into the nasal area of these dogs pretty easily, and you can end up with problems. So, when you start talking about the pitfalls of what hunting dogs can encounter, it's pretty enormous. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen. Most of the time, it doesn't. It's amazing that these dogs can use their noses and do what they do, and for the most part, come out unscathed. But it's really up to us to make sure that dog's checked out. The other things is, like Thomas mentioned, then is checking the other parts of the body, the feet, the pads. A dog might have a bad pad and may not be limping, so that may not be the thing that you're looking for. I didn't see that if the dog had a bad pad, he'd be limping. Well, not necessarily. Some of these dogs are so driven to hunt that they'll plow through a lot of injury and continue to hunt. I had a lab one time that she'd gone through a barbed wire fence and tore her whole front chest open. And it was a real rainy, muddy kind of a day, and she was so covered with mud. I think the mud actually probably ended up, stopping the bleeding for the most part, but that dog never missed a beat. And it wasn't until we got her back to the truck that I even was able to notice that there was something wrong with her. And I think it took 12 or 15 stitches to close her up. But that's how dogs are driven, and so you got to really be mindful of that.
Yeah, CJ did that last fall right away, and it was a windy day. I took it as a training moment. Take her out by herself and make her work that wind. If she was going with the wind, work her around, and I shot a bird, and it sailed and sailed and sailed, and the wind just took it, and she went over, and I forgot there was an old fence buried in this area. I knew it's been there for years. It's on our family property, and I've been saying, we got to get rid of that fence. Got to get rid of that fence. I seen her kind of hit something and nothing. She picked the bird up, brought it to me, crossed over the creek and headed back to the pickup, and she hunted nice all the way, and I shot another bird, and I was pretty happy. I had my limit in a short amount of time in the wind, and I was more impressed with myself for shooting in that wind, and took a picture, and before I knew it, I looked at the pictures and her leg's all cut up. And she took 7 stitches on the front leg, and it's like, okay, I should have checked her when I saw her hit that fence, but she's run into fences before, but those are all good things. Just check your dog over. It's no different. And when you fall down when we were kids, we fall in the gravel. The first thing we do is look at her knees, make sure her knees aren't bleeding, her elbows. The dogs dogs are so passionate and so driven to do what they want to do. I mean, having coon dogs my whole life, those dogs will come out of brush piles of stuff and it'll look like war happened and they
Yeah.
whatever, let's keep going. And they just did, it was,
Yeah, that's the
and
worst thing it can. I mean, the worst injury. What I thought was the worst injury I ever saw was when my setter took on that coon that we talked about earlier, and that coon had bit him in the right around the eyes. Luckily, it didn't get his eye, but they were the coon was going for the eye,
mm-hmm.
but didn't get it. But the dog's head, they're so vascular that when they get any kind of slight wound like that, I thought the dog was going to bleed out. I never saw so much blood in my life. I mean, and then I'm out in the middle of the field, and I really didn't have what I needed that day, for bandages or for anything to get on this dog to stop the bleeding. And I think the other guys I was with, we were all kind of, anybody have a handkerchief, anybody have whatever, a T-shirt, whatever, and we made do what we had. But it's a lesson learned that it's always nice to be able to carry that equipment if you need it, or carry those things. So,
and another thing that we've touched with our earlier guests is nutrition. A lot of people will feed really good food. Some people feed okay food, but your schedule is going to be, and your amount of food is going to be important, especially during hunting season. A lot of guys will feed 2-3 cups all year round on like maybe a lower fat and a lower protein, and now it's getting to the point, okay, we're working these dogs more. You don't really have to change their schedule, but let's get a little more fat, let's get a little more protein. They're burning a lot more energy. So be aware of that. I keep my dogs on a steady diet. They eat every evening. I don't feed twice a day unless I see maybe that they're maybe thinning down a little bit. They need a little more energy. But, I never feed before I hunt. If I at least give them 6 to 8 hours to digest what they have, they get cleaned out in the morning, and then you're hunting. So, a big thing with dogs, and I see it a lot online, is, well, my dog was hunting and this and that. Well, he all of a sudden I found him dead in the dog box on the way home, or he fell over dead, and they're twisting their stomachs is what they're having. They got a full belly of food, or they pull over and eat. They eat setters, they graze like cattle. So I always worry that when I see the dogs eating grass when we're hanging out or anything like that. So that's a big thing to be mindful for is how you're feeding and your regimens, and when's too much and when's not enough.
Yeah, we do feed twice a day, in the morning and then in the evening, like a lot of guys do. But we don't feed in the morning on the day we're hunting, and for the same reason. And food, if on a full stomach of food, those dogs are not going to have the type of energy that they need. They're digesting food creates heat. It's going to warm them up. They're going to be more lethargic. They're just not going to perform like they need to. Plus, you risk some of the other medical issues that you might have. Now, what we do is that after those dogs are done hunting and they've kind of cooled down, then we try to get we'll feed them, and that may happen it may happen in the field in the truck. We'll if we're not going to hunt them anymore and they've been in the box long enough to kind of cool down, then we'll do that. But we will fill the pan with water, and we'll put their kibble in that water because we want them to hydrate. That's the main thing to do. So while they're taking in that dog food, they're also hydrating at the same time. And so if you can get that accomplished, then you're going to be in good shape. And then, say it's a morning hunt, like a lot of times at the preserve, you have just a morning hunt. And so we'll do that, maybe feed them before, the long ride home. And then maybe later in the evening, we may feed them again, and depending on the situation. But that's something everybody has their own regimen to do, but do not feed those dogs before you put them out there to hunt, because you're going to really create some problems for yourself.
And the big thing is a lot of people are like, oh, they just hunted for 3 hours and I got to get them food.
Yeah,
Well,
they need a sandwich.
let them get cooled down. That is a big deal, because if they're hot, they're going to fill their bellies. They're going to get warm. They're going to have digestion issues. And my trek to Highland when I guide's 2 hours. And the last thing I do, I make sure they got their water. And if I get up the road or something, I'll let them out. Most of the time they're wore out. They're like, yeah, let's just go home. We hit the gas. I do stop at the local burger chain that the Golden Arches on the way home when I know they've had a really good day and they each get a cheeseburger.
How
And,
many points do they each have to get to qualify for that cheeseburger? That's kind
you
of,
know,
I've always wondered.
I think they know now.
Yeah.
Boomer for sure. That's actually CJ's first trip down to Highland. So
Ah,
he saw the Golden Arches and my dog boxes got nice vents they can stick their nose out, and I think he could smell it because I was going through the drive-through and his nose was out.
there you go.
He was drooling. So they earned that
That's
cheeseburger.
kind of spoiling your bird dog, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all right.
That's
It's all right. And they got home and he went to the kennel and stood by the food bowl. He's like, "Hey,
I
I'm
had
ready to
a
eat." So
first time, God, I bet it was been 10 years ago. A friend of mine I hunted with in South Dakota after the hunt on the way back. That was kind of a thing that he always did with his dog was, on the way back, stop and buy a couple cheeseburgers. And I remember doing that for the first time with him in South Dakota. And then I kind of kept doing it, as kind of as a treat, for the dogs. Not all the time, but
Yeah.
in those special situations where you had that great day and everything, then you wanted to reward the dogs that you would do it. But
Well, I woke him up at about 5 o'clock
yeah.
and got them all riled up and let them get outside and get stretched out there, all nestled into their beds. So went out there and whistled, turned the light on so they get out and stretch out, maybe air out before we put them on the road for 2 hours. So they were both pretty
Yeah.
sleepy eyed.
And maybe this is a natural time to work in since we're talking about what we're feeding our dogs as a reward at fast food places, things like that. Dogs cannot eat onions, garlic, chives, chocolate. I think everyone's kind of aware of that. Corn on the cob. Or cooked bones, grapes, raisins, things like that. So that you might not find all those types of things in your typical fast food burger, but onions, be very aware of that.
We usually order them plain, we always used to laugh, that Lou said, hold the pickles, you
Yeah.
don't want those pickles on there. But so, yeah, you got to be smart about it and make sure you just give him something that's plain Jane.
I did not hold the pickles and the onions. So
Well,
I didn't get any face kisses, but
yeah,
that little bit that's on there.
you got to be mindful of that.
Yeah, and you
don't,
do, and
don't
I didn't
overdo
think
it.
of that. And I'm sure if maybe they didn't even eat the
We've
pickles, I
got
might spit 'em out.
one of our listeners is asking about protecting dogs from the cold, and we're not thinking a lot about that right now. We will in another month, I bet we will. But that's kind of what when we talk about different breeds of dogs. That's kind of where setters, I think, have a little bit of an advantage because the shag dogs usually have a pretty good coat, and even though this time of year we're dealing with cockleburs and burrs and all kinds of stuff, from being in the cover. When the weather gets really cold, we kind of have an advantage over some of the shorter haired dogs out there. But that's the other thing you got to be careful about. You just got to know your dog and know the conditions. And if it's too cold for us, it's probably too cold for them.
Yeah, I ran into this situation last year. I guided a mentor hunt, and it rained, then the wind blew, and the dogs dried off, and it was kind of warm, and then cold front pushed through, the wind blew, and then it snowed, and then it rained while it snowed. And I could tell by about half hour into that, CJ was like, okay, I'm cold. I could see she was shivering. So, I said, hey guys, let's, she had a vest on her chest just to protect her because she's a bulldozer. And thought, she's getting cold. So I took that chest protector off and the heat just boiled out of her. And I got her in the truck, dried her off. I do carry a towel. I actually have some of those microfiber towels you can just hang up, and just kind of fluffed her hair up a little bit, got her in the dog box. And, I always keep dry straw or hay. I know you use cedar chips, and
Yeah, we
just
use
make
cedar bedding.
sure that they are can get in there and get dry. That stuff absorbs the hay. The hay absorbs the moisture. Anything you can use. A lot of people use like show dust. They call it. It's just pine dust you can get in the square things at the store. One thing I do avoid that just for the fact that there's air moving through there, just dust. It's just more dust. So bigger chips, something that's not just going to crumble when they get in there and lay down, and straw and hay kind of helps you fluff that up. and to keep it fresh throughout the year. You know, it gets wet underneath, it sinks, and then it gets moldy, and so make sure they also have proper venting in that dog box, but also make sure that's a good warm place for them to be. They're out of the wind, they're out of the weather, and they're comfortable.
Yeah, and we've all seen the dogs going down 380 on the interstate in a plastic dog crate with no cover on it in the in November after a dog's been out and and it's probably damp and wet, and boy, that's just not fair, and it's not the way to take care of your hunting buddy. So yeah, it's nice to, if you're going to have a dog in a box in the back of your truck, have it insulated. Be thinking what it would be like to be riding in the back of that pickup in the wind, and so yeah, the bedding is important. Something that's going to wick that moisture away from the dog if they are damp, especially if you're on an out-of-state trip and the dogs are really sleeping in that crate overnight. Then you really want to make sure that the bedding is right. We do use cedar bedding. It's a company out in Connecticut that has a ribbon kind of bedding. We've used that for many years, and we just kind of like it because it tends not to pack as much as sometimes straw and hay does. And it really does, because of the way they cut it, it does make a nice wick to get the moisture away from the dogs. A little, I mean, obviously it's more pricey than hay and that kind of thing, but it lasts a little longer, we think, and it's really worked well for us in our dog boxes. But
It smells good too.
yeah,
Yeah,
it smells good. They smell great when they get out of that box at home, even though they're trailing some ribbon chips sometimes. But you're right. Be thinking about those kinds of things that a lot of people don't put a lot of emphasis on, because that's important. And
And a lot of people just throw the dogs in the back seat and they head home, which they're in there, and it's not gonna shock them. But when they're out there cold, just like us, your body's warming up, and dogs are gonna warm up a heck of a lot faster than you or I are most of the time, and that's just something you need to watch. And when they get them in there cold, and then you start hearing that dog pant. After about 10 minutes, you can say, okay, he's getting hot. You got to turn the heat down. Well, you're cold still. And so make sure that dog's got water. And hydration, we can't push that enough. Even if it's cold, keep them hydrated. A lot of people, well, he's really cold, he doesn't need anything to drink. Well, dogs work off their hydration. They work off their proteins and fat. If you get a dog like ours that are just all muscle and they don't generate a lot of fat, you got to make sure that everything else that you have in place for that dog to be comfortable, because especially when like you said, when you go on long trips, you might be hunting 3-4 days in a row. Right. You want that, we can go eat a steak and have a few beers and get a good night's sleep, and we're fine. Sleep in a bed. And these dogs don't, some dogs don't have that luxury, and they're putting on 3 times as many miles as we are. So just make sure they're comfortable.
A nice dry bed at night is little to ask for, and so if we can do that, that's what we need. Even for the hour or 2 hour trip back from the preserve to home, that's what we need to do. So, and it's just another one of those common sense things. Somebody has asked another question about how do you know when your dog's going to have a problem, or is having a problem with the cold or the heat. A lot of that comes down to knowing your dog, and you see some behavior that's a little bit out of the norm. It should kind of raise your suspicions that something's going on. But I've never really had cold weather problems with dogs, other than the weather you're talking about. Wet, kind of, not really snow, but just that in between wet and wind. When the dog gets cold, it's wet, and that wind is blowing. That seems to have the most effect, at least on the setters I've seen running. And if it's just damn cold weather, but it's clear skies, it's just cold, sometimes that's not a problem.
And usually it doesn't hit them. And I noticed it doesn't hit them when they're hunting. It's especially if you're changing spots, you throw them in the dog box, right. They cool down, and then you dump them back out and go. It's like, then they're like, okay, I cooled down. Now I'm froze out here, and I've had them actually jump back in the box, like, this is enough of this. And you're going to tell, even if a dog's hot or if they're cold, they're going to slow down. You're going to see, I can, setters, our dogs just go, and a lot of people's hunting dogs go, but you can always tell, you can tell when they're tired. But
Because
you
they'll
can,
go. I mean,
they'll go, and
I hunted one time at 10 below zero. I would not recommend that. It was a dumb thing to do. I mean, but at the time, had a couple clients that were set on hunting. Thankfully, they were great shots, and the hunt only lasted about 35 minutes, and they had their birds, and we were out of there. But yeah, conditions like that, you just got to be smart, and say, let's just wait for another day, and we don't need to be out here doing this. So
and if you do that, and I got told this a long time ago, it's perfectly fine to do it, but as soon as you feel uncomfortable, like their nose is exposed and they're breathing that cold air, they're breathing harder than we are. So if you are going to, and if it's really cold, and I'm like, gosh, I gotta get these dogs out. It's been cold all week, and they're going nuts, and I just got a short little spot that I go to. It's a 10-minute walk. You either see a bird or you don't. If you harvest one, good job. If you don't, it's not a big deal. But I get them back in the warm, and their
Yeah.
lungs get froze and burned just like ours do. Because you walk outside and take a deep breath when it's cold, it burns. And I mean, they have almost the same anatomy as us, and so you got, if you're not going to do it, don't put the dog to, make the dog do it either.
one of the things we're going to be talking about a little more in future podcasts will be kind of updating you on how the season's going for my dogs and Thomas's dogs and other dogs that we've been hunting with. A lot of times we hunt with other guides and different breeds of dogs, and I enjoy that. I like to see the German short hairs and the setters and the Brittany's all kind of working together, and it's kind of fun to do. But I think what's the status of the bird numbers? I mean, are you hearing from DNR that the numbers are up quite a bit this year in Iowa? What are you hearing?
And the southern part of the state, I know they've had drought issues, and when you don't have rain, you don't have bugs. When you don't have bugs, the pheasants aren't eating as much, and there's gonna be a lot of crops in the field, I think, and still, but it's spotty. Southern Iowa, not good. We were walking through cracks 3-4 inches wide down there, south of Iowa City where we guide, and it's just dry. And
What are they saying is the hot spots then? Mid central or
yeah, it's kind of that Highway 20
Central?
line, 35, and obviously western Northwest Iowa is always really good.
So it must be pretty good up there around you then, up there around Parkersburg, up in Greene County, up that way.
Butler County, I haven't seen any pheasants up there. No,
Yeah.
no,
but
and
there's not a bird.
there ain't any
they'll be
birds
coming-
up there.
They'll be coming there. Might
No.
as well just go to South Dakota.
And
They'll be coming up there.
all the people I've talked to, it's been really good. And where you're seeing drought, there's some decline. I did talk to a guy in southeast Iowa the other day, and he's not a hunter, but he's got a great property. He supports hunting, and he's actually he's retired, and he's turned his whole property into this oasis for wildlife. And he actually told me he had 12 quail on his front lawn the other day.
Wow.
He hadn't seen a quail ever, and he's like,
Yeah,
I got
that's-
quail, and
yeah,
I got
that's,
roosters, and so the bird numbers are good. It's just you look at the DNR report, and they're good here, they're okay
Little
here, they're
spotty.
down, but it all depends if they saw them.
Yeah.
I've seen where we had 3 or 4 broods in one spot that I saw every day on my way to work, and then you go a mile down the road and you think, oh God, there's got to be birds here, and you never see them. So, but with the amount of crops that are still in, the farmers are going like crazy now, and they got about half a day rest yesterday, and they're back at her. And
hopefully in the next 2 weeks we'll get a lot of that corn out.
yeah, and that's a big deal
Have
too.
a better idea what we got.
Real
to
big
work
deal.
with. But
Mhm.
yeah, and for everybody out there that's listening, let us know some other subjects that you might want us to talk about. We're kind of out here to try to bring some more information to you all. So feel free to text us, send us an email, or go on our Facebook page and let us know what you would like to hear more about, whether it's personally about us, and what we do with our dogs, and a little more about the dogs. We'd be more than happy to do that. So we're just trying to have fun with this, and hopefully you learn something along the way. And if we can help you do that, we have done what we set out to do.
Yeah, and we got some adventures coming up here soon, and we're going to try and get on some hunting trips together, and guiding. We'll have a lot of experience. I'm actually
Yeah.
doing a women's hunt through the Iowa DNR here
There you
in
go.
2 or 3 weeks. So check out their website. They have a lot of different ways you can sign up for learn to hunt stuff, youth events. Youth season starts next weekend. We got our big youth event for our Pheasants Forever. And if you have a kid that's got her hunter safety, want to try it,
Yeah.
call your local PF chapter and check with them on their Facebook pages or somebody you know. There's people willing to get some kids out next week, and,
Great
and they're all
resources.
they're giving guns out. Orange, there's a lot of lessons to be learned. You get to go hunting with different dogs, and it's just a huge deal. So if you can get somebody out hunting or check out some of those resources, if you're interested, whether you're 14 years old or you're 65, there's resources out there. And if they want to learn a little bit more about English setters or just pheasant hunting or anything, just let them know that we're out here and we're
Have dogs will travel.
have dogs will travel, but we, have them subscribe to the podcast and send us.
Yeah, we really need
send
your
us some
help
info.
there. We're not bashful about telling you all to, help us out. Subscribe to the podcast if you like it. That just helps us and motivates us to keep going, to keep doing this podcast if we know somebody out there's enjoying it and or getting something out of it. So yeah, please subscribe. You can listen to it as you're driving down the road on the radio on different platforms that we have, as well as watching this version on Facebook or YouTube or whatever. So yeah, check that out. And
And we're not running out of material. We don't want you to think that,
well,
Wade
we do
and I,
have.
we're both gifted
Yeah, you're a sales guy.
with gab.
Yeah,
We
well, I
both
guess
have
we
that
are.
gift of gab.
We
So
do have some pretty cool things that are coming up
Yep.
here in the near future, and we're not going to be letting that out of the bag tonight. But in some future episodes, we're going to be able to talk about some real neat things, some projects that we have coming up, and what we're going to be doing with some live podcasts that we're going to be doing at different places to try to bring some of that location stuff right to this podcast. And so anyway,
right to the field, maybe.
well, you never know. You
We
never know.
can make
Our-
fun of
our
fun
eng-
of
our
you
en-
for missing,
Our
or
engineer's pretty talented that way. I
Yeah,
think
he
we
is.
Yeah,
can
what are
bring-
you signing me up for?
I think we can bring this show to you from wherever we
Yeah.
want to. So isn't that right? So we'll put Will on the spot to make that happen. But in the meantime, enjoy the season, the upland hunting. Get your dog out there and put him to work.
and we appreciate everybody that's listening. And one thing we don't push hard is safety. If the shot isn't safe, don't take it. If this, ask permission on your private landowners, be respectful of everybody you're hunting with, and like I always say, keep their nose in the wind.
Always.
Yeah.
See you next time.